There. Okay, here we go. You're lucky I'm terrified of redheads, but anyway, yeah, exactly. So what's your name again?
What is it? Dominic.
Dominic Carty, leader of the NDP.
Yeah.
Now, I seen you had a video. Somebody sent it to me.
Yep.
You, sort of like, you spoke your views. I must admit, I even said on Twitter, I said, my God, it's just about the Rexton, the arrest and the raid. Sort of said, is he a minister of the our government, the way he's talking, or what's your stand about what happened?
And Rexton?
Yeah.
I think that any time that you get into anything other than civil disobedience, which means actually trying to get arrested, it really risks dividing people, and you get people who are, makes it easier to oppose your cause. That's why I'm down here today, because I think this is fantastic.
The win. Yeah, oh yeah,
Yep.
We'll get to this this later, but what I'm saying is, if there's people, they want to be arrested. They were there protesting against shale gas.
Yep.
So they didn't really want to be arrested.
But that to me is the problem. Like you can't block a road unless you're doing it to get arrested, because otherwise you just have sort of lawlessness and anyone can do whatever they want. And that's not the way to look after the rights of minority groups, especially First Nations, who have had the law used against them for hundreds of years. So
Yep.
if you want to change the laws, the only way you can do that is either through just regular peaceful protest, and this is a great example, or you can do it with civil disobedience. But civil disobedience means showing that laws are unjust by intentionally getting yourself arrested. So like lying down on a road, the cops come, haul you away, you go to jail, you get booked, you come back out, you go down, you lie on the road again, and you keep doing that. So the whole point is to show that the system isn't working by showing the laws aren't fair. But if you just block a road and stay there indefinitely, all you're doing is blocking a road, which is stopping people from going to school and going to work and other things. So that's stopping it, and as we saw, stopping emergency vehicles.
But what happens, the emergency vehicle, I was there, and the emergency vehicle could have been true, but what do you do if the government do not want to listen?
Well, what you do, well,
They listen, but they don't want to really.
My answer to that question is you do something to change it. And that's why I got involved in politics. And I'm just a guy from Fredericton. I got involved, I became leader of the NDP because I was upset that the government wasn't listening. I became leader after the last election. The last election, unfortunately, in my view, we elected a government that said it was going to develop shale gas. We have an election next year. You've got now the Liberals, even though they signed the leases, say they're opposed to it, who knows. But at least you've got, officially, 2 of the 3 big parties say that they're in favor of stopping the industry. So let's get the election. If I get elected next year and don't do what I said, which is on the very first day, issue a minister's letter saying that the licenses are suspended.
How much will it cost you?
Well, to suspend them doesn't cost you anything. If they then start to sue you, then it can become expensive, and who knows how much that could be.
Yeah, that's what I think I hear, 50 million or 75 million if you bail out.
But so far, look what we're spending. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on security, on PR campaigns, on consultations with guys who don't have real doctorate degrees. We've spent a lot of money, and what's it generated? We don't even have a single job. We haven't had a single person who's done well out of shale gas in New Brunswick, except for people who work for security companies.
So you would suspend their license if you're elected NDP?
Yep, first day we're sworn in.
The first day you're sworn in. So what happened there were, in your opinion, those protesters in Rexton, are they troublemakers, or were they activists? What were they, in your opinion?
I didn't go to the blockade because, as I said, I spent lots of time living overseas, and I have a real problem. I lived in places where there were blockades every day for every reason, and it stopped people from being able to live their lives, and it just made people angry at the protesters. So the reason I didn't go is because I support the fight against shale gas, and I think that blockading roads is not the best way to go about it. So I don't know the folks who were at the blockade. I know some of them. Susan Levi-Peters, who's a good close friend of mine. I know you know Susan. And I was on the phone with her all the time, and she was doing her best to try and keep the peace and keep folks calm, and she did a really amazing job, something that I'm happy to be able to say on camera, that on the day when the RCMP moved in, Susan was right there in the middle trying to make sure that women and kids were taken out of harm's way when the RCMP came in.
Did the RCMP use too much force?
I wasn't there. So that's the stuff that I'm going to...
Are you concerned when you see the chief and common council arrested and handcuffed?
I'm concerned anytime I see anyone in New Brunswick thrown in jail for any reason. But in this case, my biggest concern is that instead of talking about why shale gas is bad, we're now spending our time talking about what did the RCMP do, what did the protesters do, and we're not talking about shale gas. So this meeting here, seeing the Longhouse, seeing the teepees coming up, seeing people coming from all the First Nations across the province, that is going to send the sort of powerful message that the government's going to not be able to ignore because they're right across from the legislature.
You're going
to be much harder.
You're going to enjoy. You're going to enjoy this question. How come Brian Gallant has been so quiet?
Well, I think Mr. Gallant is.
He's the MLA from Kent County.
Officially, at least, yeah. Well, he's already announced he's not running their next election, so I guess maybe he doesn't care so much.
But how come he's so quiet?
Well, I think Mr. Gallant likes to avoid taking positions on difficult issues because he thinks that's how he's going to get elected. He doesn't realize that politics in New Brunswick has changed and that there is now a choice between the two old line parties who always, when they're in opposition, say they want things that are good for folks, and then when they get elected, But that's why I'm in this, right? Like, if I didn't get involved with the NDP in New Brunswick because I thought there was an easy way to get power.
Yeah.
I did it because I think it's the only way that we can actually change the province, which is supposed to be what everyone involved in politics wants. And there are lots of good Liberals and Tories who I know are upset about the way their government's handling this file and the way the Liberal Party is handling this file. And so my voice is to go out there and say, look, come and join us and let's get this province fixed up. There's a lot of work to do.
You said earlier, David Albert, they said it was in their platform, show gas.
Yep.
But I never seen show gas. I seen
natural gas.
Yeah, it didn't really. It goes to show you have to read the platform.
Yep. Well,
who does?
Well, the last election, it was something. I mean, I was helping write the NDP platform in the last election, and I remember starting to read about shale gas and fracking. It was the first time I'd seen it. I said, well, maybe this might bring us some benefits. And then looking more, I was like, there's just I don't see the science here yet. This is kind of worrying. And then looking at the Liberal and Tory platforms, and they're both saying, hey, we're going to go ahead with this. I think these guys don't have the background knowledge yet.
What's the difference between NDP, PC, and Liberals?
In one sentence, we're actually going to do the things that we talk about doing. So one thing you can guarantee, I think you've known me long enough, Charles, to know that when I say I'm going to do something, even if it's not necessarily popular, I'll do it. And that's what we've got to do in the province. We've got to have a government that when it says something, actually means it. So when I talk about our policy on shale gas and suspending the licenses on the first day, that's a very specific commitment. Mr. Gallant, he's promising to wait for 2 studies to come out. One of them is an American study. I don't know what that's got to do with New Brunswick. And the other one is written by a guy who's a fellow with the Energy Institute, the outfit headed up by Dr. Lapierre, who is now, of course, discredited.
Yeah, of course.
So this guy has actually already in the press said that fracking has to happen in New Brunswick. And the Liberals are at the same time saying that Energy Institute shouldn't exist, that it should be disbanded. So, yeah, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth on this. I certainly, obviously I don't trust them, otherwise I'd be a Liberal. But
what about, how come you're not a member of the Green Party? What about David Kuhn? What about that?
You got to be serious about running a province, and that means making decisions. You can't just go to every single meeting and say, I completely agree with everyone here. We've got a very limited amount of cash in this province. And too often that's used as an excuse by right-wing parties to say that we can't have the strong social programs that we need, and that's just not true. We can have those programs, but we've got to stop wasting the money on stuff that doesn't matter. And my problem with the Green Party is February of this year, David Kuhn was saying he was ideologically opposed to an increase in HST. Last month, he says that he wants an increase in HST. He flip-flops back and forth. He says that all the other parties aren't telling the truth about shale gas, but on a CBC panel, he says that he favors developing it if it's safe and can make the province money, which is exactly the same position the NDP has. I don't think it is safe, and I don't think it's making us money. So it's a tendency. I don't like it when people are extreme in politics on either side. I think you've got to be sensible, you've got to be calm, and you've got to talk to people in a way that connects. And if you just make promises that you can't keep, you're just the same as the other guys.
I can't believe I gave you this much time, but it's okay. It's all right. We'll do this once a year. But anyway, it turned around. You caught me in a weak moment. Turn around. Would you the type to say if a person's complains a lot, bitch a lot, or whatever, wrong word, but anyway, wouldn't you agree if you don't vote, don't bitch? Would you check the voting list, see if that person voted?
I promise not to check anyone's name on the voting list.
No, but I mean, like last night, you were there, I seen you there. Now, there was maybe, 600 people that voted out of what?
It was
thousands.
20% turnout. Yeah, terrible.
So, if you don't vote, don't complain. What do you think about that?
Well, you can complain, but don't be surprised if no one listens.
And right? If the MLA doesn't do anything for your concern, why should you if they don't vote?
Well, and that's part of the problem. There are some places like Australia where they have compulsory voting laws and everyone has to vote. I think in the end it's up to people if they wanted to go out and to vote or not, but it makes it a lot harder for people's voices to be heard if people don't use the tools they have. And you're getting back to your first question about Rexton. We haven't had, since this government came in, and like you said, most people didn't really understand the issue around shale gas or fracking. Any of those terms weren't much discussed in 2010. We've got an election next year. let's go out and use the tool we've got. That's the tool that can change things. It was by elections that we brought in public health care. Otherwise, we would have a system that's even worse than the American system. Yeah, that's the system that gave us public pensions, CPP, disability benefits, all of that stuff. That all came from votes. And protest is a part of that, but it's got to be linked in with the tools that we already have at our disposal. So, absolutely. Sessions like this, which, I mean, this isn't even a protest. This is an offer to talk, the Longhouse and the TVs.
And that's why I'm letting you talk. See, I'm so
You're
nice.
honoring this year in the spirit of the moment.
Exactly.
And so let's continue these sort of conversations and then feed it into that election next year. Yeah, I'm not saying vote NDP. Go out and vote. If you think the Tories are right, then go out and vote for them. If you like Brian Gallant, I mean, he does have very nice hair. Yeah, he's there as an option as well. So there's all kinds of choices out there. And if you don't like the way the political process works, get involved. Yeah, you know, I was living overseas for years. I got involved in politics when I moved home, and yeah, within a couple of years I was leader of a political party that's taken reasonably seriously. Anyone can get involved in politics if they want to. If you've got a couple of hours of spare time, give that to a political party or to a cause that is helping to talk about the things you care about.
Will you eliminate?
It's a real gift.
Will you eliminate this racist, discriminated law wearing a bicycle while you're driving wearing a helmet when you're driving a bike?
You should never wear a bicycle.
Yeah, I know that. You see, I'm so wound up. I'm giving you so much time. I'm upset. That's why I don't know what I'm saying. Would you eliminate this helmet law?
That's a municipal law.
No, that's a provincial law.
Is it the provincial law?
New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and British Columbia are the only one that hasn't. This is called single out certain individuals like moi, voila.
Well,
and you know what happened there.
I think that's more of the issue, is making sure you don't have anyone who's singling out any specific individuals. But I have not thought about that. We should talk about that when the camera's off, and you can try and convince me. Because my first thought is...
Convince a redhead?
I can change my mind. I was on Facebook yesterday. You know Miles Howe, the guy in the Halifax Media Co-op? And I'd come out a couple of weeks ago and said that I thought it was bad that the way that the journalists' crews had been handled up in Rexton. I thought that was, yeah, you should never bother the journalists.
No.
Keeping them out of a place like this, absolutely fine. This is a sacred space. But in public roads, journalists need the right to go.
What's a journalist?
So it was Miles Howe was arrested a couple of months before.
I know.
And I hadn't come out and said the same thing when he was arrested. And I realized, that wasn't just because he works for a non-profit, basically, for the co-op. He's still a journalist. So I came out yesterday and said, I was wrong on this. I should have done that. And I sent that note to him.
You did? You were wrong on what?
On that I should have come out and been as hard when Miles Howe was arrested as when the CTV and Global crews had their equipment seized.
Oh, okay.
That it's anytime you bother journalists, it's a bad thing.
What's a journalist? Thank you. What's a journalist here in New Brunswick? An Irving employee?
Journalist is anyone who's out there reporting the news, preferably someone who's got some sort of accreditation, because that helps protect the journalist. Mm-hmm. But if you're reporting the news, then as far as I'm concerned, you're a journalist. And that's, like, I've lived in places where journalists get treated badly. We don't want New Brunswick to turn into one of those places. I'd much rather have journalists being a little bit more pushy than having to worry all the time.
So anyway, we'll leave it at that.
Can I just throw in one?
You want to go?
No, I just throw in a question, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
Now, when the arrest happened over in Rexton, you said that you were in favor of the rule of law being applied in that situation. But I mean, the fact is that it's unceded Native territory. So if they're defending their land, that's the rule of law, isn't it?
No, because it's unceded, but there's a peace and friendship treaty which includes the right to mutual use of the land, and clearly anything that's a public roadway that all of us have paid for, all of us in the province have contributed money to build those roadways, that would be considered part of the peace and friendship treaty. Has to go both ways.
But what we're talking about here is the SWN actually trying to go in and do hydraulic fracturing, basically the early stages of seismic testing. So the Mi'kmaq people and their allies are trying to stop that process from happening. Isn't that their right? So aren't they allowed to physically erect a blockade?
No.
You don't think so?
Because it's a public roadway which stops people from going to school, stop people from going to work. And as I was saying to Charles earlier, I don't know if you heard the first part of my discussion with him, using civil disobedience in that sort of case, like in the case in Rexton, you had the parking lot, basically the compound where they had all the trucks, that to show that you're against SWIN and the seismic testing, using civil disobedience, going down, lying in front of the gates, that's not blocking the public road, that's making the point to SWIN, making the point to the government in the same way. But anytime you're breaking the law, you've got to be ready to embrace the consequences of that so that you can help change the laws. Otherwise, it's just making it easier for the big companies to say, well, why should we follow the rules? These guys don't. And they've got more power than we have. And if we keep on in that direction, it's just an opportunity for them to put the thumbs down on you even harder.
Okay, so you think what happened to the Warriors is fair then?
Fair?
As far as the arrests? And
I think that anything that's public property, you can't block it, because otherwise you're hurting everyone. And it hurts the cause as well. That in the case, we stopped talking about whether or not anyone's for or against shale gas, and we started talking about, do you think the Warriors are right or not? And that to me is not I'm not interested in a public conversation in New Brunswick about the Warriors. I'm interested in one about shale gas.
Right.
And if we're going to talk about shale gas, the way to win the opinions of people who next year are going to either vote for a Conservative Party that's in favor of it, or for the other parties who are against it, is to make sure we get as many facts out as possible about the fact this government doesn't enforce environmental regulations, has a really bad history of enforcing any sorts of laws, has a really bad record of letting companies walk all over them, as we saw. So I think those are the messages we need to focus on.
Right.
And anything else distracts from the cause.
Wouldn't you say, though, that it's the media's responsibility in order to focus on all the correct issues, rather than put the blame on people who are resisting? Isn't it the media's responsibility to ensure that the focus is actually on all the issues? So the fact that there's perhaps an overly great focus on the conflict issues, isn't that the fault of the media rather than the fault of the people themselves?
I don't think so, because the media's job is to report on what's going on. And so they're reporting on this because this is happening. The blockade was presumably designed partly to get attention. My concern is that it was drawing attention to the wrong thing, which was whether or not a blockade is good, rather than whether or not shale gas is good. And so, I spent my professional life working with people fighting for democratic rights, including a lot of minority groups in different parts of the world. And the thing that I saw over and over again was that what bad governments look for is when people say the law doesn't matter, because then that gives the companies the opportunity, or bad governments the opportunity to say, well, okay, you guys don't think the law matters, neither do we. And then they become much more repressive. So the way to get change is we need to use the tools that we've got. And we haven't had an election yet. We haven't gone to use the courts. We haven't used civil disobedience. So all of those tools are still not used. This, I think, is a really good step in terms of invitation to the MLAs and the party people from the political parties to come down here and talk. That's a good way to start the conversation.
Do you think that there's the aggressive the case of Rexton, that would justify an investigation into that?
An inquiry, yeah. What's but David Cohen, an inquiry, what happened?
Well, I haven't seen, the one thing that I was really happy about from what happened there is that there weren't too many people who were badly hurt. And that you didn't have, which we've seen in other places, where you've had people with limbs broken and people ending up in hospital.
There was a guy who, a native man who shot in the leg, and now he's not sure.
Well, the woman that was badly bruised, I seen the bruise, saw that on TV.
But this is part of it, right? Like I was living in Nepal a few years ago, and there was a revolution against. They had a king who didn't even allow he'd gotten rid of the elected government. And I went out and I was part of that revolution. And there were people around me who were getting shot at with live bullets. And we all accepted. I knew that I was out there. I was a foreigner. I was working with the political parties there. I knew that the consequence of me going out there was that I could be shot.
So being shot at without being shot live with real bullets.
Those were with live bullets.
Yeah. So here we should consider ourselves lucky.
Well, not lucky, but
fortunate.
What's the point here? The point here is to try and stop shale gas, right? And anytime we're protesting, we're talking to not just the people who are the cops in this case. We're talking to the broader public, trying to convince them that our side is right. And that's the point of having a protest. We're trying to talk to people. So if the message we're sending is one that we don't mind breaking the rules because it happens to support our cause, then again, it just comes back to it. It makes it so much easier for them, as they did, to come back and say, well, these guys don't care. That's why I talked about the rule of law being important. Like, this is the way we talk about it. We say, you want to have nation-to-nation discussions, which everyone keeps on saying they want? Well, here are the nations, right here.
But if they have it all here, they're talking, the dumper trucks are going, they keep on drilling, but they keep on talking in there, but they're still going to do what they want to do. How are you supposed to stop that?
We've got an election coming up in 10 months' time. All of the parties except one say that they want to stop this. There's not going to be any fracking this year. I would be stunned if there was any next summer, because they still haven't finished the
election year. That would be
well. Apart from that just being politically a bad idea, I just don't think that from everything I know about the industry, it takes them more time to get things ramped up. So we're not going to see fracking before the election, unless something miraculous happens and Swin is allowed to continue operations through the winter.
So what are you going to stop? How do we stop them?
We have an election. Vote in a party that says it's going to stop it. I'm being clear in my position. First day an NDP government's elected, the cabinet minister responsible for shale gas signs a letter to Swin and to the other companies who've been issued leases saying those leases are suspended. And then we get into discussions around compensation for the fact that they're not breaking the law. The Conservative government was legally elected by a majority of New Brunswickers. They won a huge majority. The companies have leases that they were signed by the Liberals before the last election, and they haven't broken the law.
And you know, one more. That's it. Because you know what? Last one. Because I gave him permission to use this video on his website if he wants, because he stood there. He stood there in the cold. Holy Jesus! Well, okay, come on. Last one.
When you're saying it was all done legally, what about free, prior, and informed consent?
That's what we should be talking about, because the big problem is the government's now trying to claim this isn't the case, but everything I've seen and the way I've read the leases, it's pretty clear. You get your development license, your exploration license rather. You spend a certain amount of money, fill in some papers, and you get your development license. The requirement for the exploration license is really minimal. All it requires there is sending a letter saying, "Hi, we're going to do seismic testing." That's also in the law. The requirement for the development license they haven't even started to do that. And you can't go around devolving that power to the companies. So I've been saying consistently that the only way it can be a real consultation is if First Nations or other communities have the right to say no. Having a guy from Swin turn up and say, "Hi, I'm here to consult," and everyone says, "Well, we don't want you here at all," he's not going to report that. It's not in the company's interest. So the government has to run the consultations. There has to be real consent with First Nations, because otherwise it's just going to we're going to keep going down the path we are now, where First Nations are starting to talk about a lawsuit to talk about land claims.
You got 30 seconds. Is there going to be drilling for shale gas here in this province?
Not if there's an NDP government next year.
What about Conservative? Would they still go on, you think, with the natives? And
they will absolutely go on. They've been really clear on that. Yeah, so, NDP government, we're not going to do this unless it's guaranteed to be safe and guaranteed to make us money. And that's today, neither of those conditions apply. And you've also got to have that, people always talk about the social license. You got to have people actually buying into this and thinking, okay, I don't think this is going to damage my water. I think we can make some money for our families. Neither of those conditions apply. That's why we have the protest. That's why Rexton happened. The government doesn't have the license that they need from communities, especially from First Nations. So let's start talking.
Spoken like a true party in opposition. Thank you.